So my name's Zach Norman, a member of the MassAccess Conference. Most of you are sitting through the second half of this after the first.
The rest of it goes pretty quickly.
Neil and Leslie not need much of an introduction.
To that point.
They graciously come today to help us learn some more about organization planning, some human resources. So kind of without further ado, I'll let them get back into their presentation. And I also want to let you know the slides that they're presenting on the screen will be available on our website shortly, so everybody can utilize those in their own organizations. Right, so enjoy the second half of this.
Wherever she runs. Her. Yeah, she keeps us organized, which is a non-trivial task.
Okay, guys. If everybody can see it, that would be great. Next major event is lunch, and I want to make sure that we wrap up in time. I know standing between you and lunch is never a good thing. Okay. Okay, if we go through this process that we've been talking about, we're going to have, what would be the deliverables of the process? What can we expect as part of the outcome if you were to do this successfully? One, it prioritizes the urgent from the important. Every organization has a list larger than they can deal with in what they have to get done. A strategic plan is the exact same way. So this allows you to use a process to determine what the priority of the issue should be, and the urgent is clearly more important than the important. So, and it's hard to do sometimes. Next, comprehensive environmental analysis. So, one has to determine, in order to do a plan, one has to do an analysis of the environment. What do we mean by an analysis of the environment? We mean effectively, who's out there as the competitors? And what I mean for competitors, remember, your job is to try to capture the eyeballs, and in some cases the money associated with your end user. So you're always in competition, and you're more competition now than we ever were before, because there's so many options for entertainment. If you're talking about people turning into cable TV, well, think about all the things they can do in the evening other than turning into your channel. So you got to make it compelling. You got to have a mission statement that's going to get people involved. Second, there are certain things that are controllable and uncontrollable. And one of the points that was brought up today, the issue of, can you actually look at alternate revenue streams? Is that legal for not-for-profit? I'm not going to make a judgment on that because I'm not an attorney. But there are answers to that, and we've been involved in some engagements where that was one of the action items to go through, and my recollection is that it was generally a positive feel that that could be done. But that's an environmental factor, that's a regulation issue, that I'm saying regulations will affect what you can do and what you can't do. Those are non-controllable. You got to try and stay on top of them, and you got to try to use methods, and maybe one of the methods is to use MassAccess as a lobbying industry group to try and get what you need done and do that in a cooperative way. But there are things that are uncontrolled, so that's uncontrollable. The ones that are controllable are the ones where you want to spend the majority of your time. But you can't avoid the others. And then there's what I'll call cultural changes. So what we talked about, the competition for your user is all entertainment things. If some new opportunity comes up for entertainment that you had no idea was coming, I view that as a cultural change. That's going to affect you. And in many ways, that's just a competitor getting more savvy. Okay. Important part of a strategic plan is that it defines the mission and purpose of the organization. How many organizations have a mission statement? How many organizations think it's a good mission statement and is actually used on a daily basis? Pretty good. Okay. But always important to review that over time, because sometimes the mission of the organization changes. The strategic plan allows you to do that and gives you a framework. It allows you to define a vision. Different than a mission statement, but it's saying where the organization would like to be in the future. Mission statement's more current. Vision is where you want to be. They may be one and the same, or they may change. Major areas of activity, where you want to put your resources. The most important thing you can do is determine where should your resources within the organization and effectively your dollars be invested. You want to do that where it's going to have the greatest outcome and be most important to the organization's success. And finally, you know, everybody rallying around what the long-range goals of the organization are. This becomes an opportunity to get the entire organization rowing the boat in the same direction. Very key to success in the future. And also, most importantly, if you bring the right constituents into the process, they'll own the process and they'll own the results of the process. Therefore, they become players. Matter of fact, in many cases, you'll find they'll become major advocates, even though they might have been against it initially. Most people, myself included, yourselves included, like to be asked what your opinion is. And bringing constituents and appropriate parties in allows them to become part of it and get that question answered. And finally, you'll have a detailed tactical plan to achieve interim and long-term goals. Ensures the success of completing the assignment. Okay? And successful completing an assignment generally means that you hit the right long-term goals, that you've done it in a timely fashion, and you've done it within budget, within dollars that you expected to spend. That's a successful outcome. Any questions? Okay. We've been beating this point to death, but it's terribly important. A strategic plan must be dynamic to be successful. No matter what we come up with today, it's going to change. Some assumptions will happen, some assumptions won't happen. This allows you to constantly benchmark how you're doing against it, what's changed in the environment, what's changed in your assumptions, and what changes you have to make to the plan to be successful going forward. If it doesn't get reviewed, it will never be successful. Absolutely key. Okay, we're going to switch gears now. Melinda had asked us to talk a little bit about HR resources for your organization. And how many people, probably, my guess is very few, how many people actually have somebody who's responsible, that's an actual HR director, that's their job? That's what organization?
I work for a town, so we have to know.
Oh, okay. So the town has that. Okay. How many people have somebody in the organization who has HR plus other responsibilities? Okay, more of you. How many people have nobody they would know where to go if there was an HR issue? Okay. Some of them. Okay, this will probably be useful. The important point to remember is this is a complex area. You know, press the bottom, I think that's what you
Oh, should be good.
Okay.
So we use an outside organization that provides us HR resources. So we don't have anybody on staff in the building, but we have somebody we can call if we have an issue.
It's good. Are they working well?
Yeah, we've been using them for 8 years now, so.
Care to mention the name?
It's Resource Management Inc., they're in Fitchburg. We get benefits from them, they do all our HR issues.
They keep you up to date on regulations or things that might change
Yes,
within state and federal laws.
yes.
Good stuff. That's one of the resources I have here. There are third-party groups that can do this on an outsourced basis. Okay, what are the major things you should be thinking about in the HR world, human resources world? One, and probably most critical, is payroll. I say it's most critical because most workers work and they get a paycheck as well as other things. Having run an HR company which handles payroll for outside, for companies, if you don't meet payroll, that causes a lot of noise in an organization. It doesn't make for a lot of happy campers, I can guarantee you that. As CEO of the company, one of the most important things I did, any organization is going to have problems. There's no doubt. And our organization was no different. I think we did a good job, but the issue is there's always a problem because you're dealing with computers, you're dealing with technology. How an organization responds to the problem is usually important. So if you're looking for a payroll, how many people use an outside payroll? How many people use ADP? How many people use Paychecks? Well, big Paychecks. The company that I was running was actually bought by Paychecks back 11 years ago. Well, it's a big company, I understand. But Paychecks first of all, they should do the payroll accurately, but they have other services, ancillary services that can be helpful, depending on who your representative is and how your customer service people are being handled. But they do represent a resource. I mentioned it's a funny industry. There's local companies that will do this also, and sometimes they're better to deal with because you're a more important entity to them. A regional player, a person who only handles Massachusetts or maybe New England, and that's pretty good. I see you shaking your head. Who do you use? I'm just curious.
They're called these checks. Our auditors said to still be down when Marston Bill's done.
Yeah.
Nice, small, very responsive.
Yeah.
But they don't offer some of those other services that we're talking about. No HR and certain things that they do.
Right, but what they do well, and what they do, they make you feel like they're important.
Yes.
To get it done.
Biz checks payroll is down in Marston Bill's down too.
Okay, next is something as simple as an employee handbook. How many organizations have an employee handbook? Good. This is key. Employee handbook's key because that sets up the rules and regulations by which employees know they're being measured and what they should be doing to be a successful employee. If there's no benchmark established, and you tell them they're doing something wrong, they clearly can say, I didn't do that. So legally, this is one of the most important things you can do as an organization, and I advise you to do it. Some of the payroll companies, Paychecks is one of them, I know, and ADP, they'll actually provide a handbook. I don't know whether it's any good, but developing a handbook, there are outside resources that can help you do that. Sometimes a labor lawyer can help you do that. And don't get scared by lawyers, they're not always as expensive as you think they are. It's pretty competitive out there. Employee care and feeding. This is a general term I use for the things that you have to think about to keep employees happy. One is classifications. What classification does an employee have? The smaller the organization, the less important this is, but as you get to being a reasonable sized number of people, you want to try to classify employees because that may affect what their benefits are. Performance issues. Key issue here is if you're having a problem with an employee and you want to fire them, and you've never given them a warning before, I will warn you generally, and you don't have documented proof of the fact that you've had discussions with them and you've told them where their performance is not that standards, etc., put them through a performance plan, you're going to have trouble. You have a legal liability if you just let them go. You even have more trouble if they're considered one of what I'll call the endangered species, which I always found this a little crazy. To be considered a senior person, anybody over 40. Obviously, at my age, I find that a little crazy. Finally, things like vacation policy should be established, has to be established. Benefits. What does the organization provide? What do they provide in health, dental, 401k? You have a different name for the, I forget, what's it called for non-for-profit? 403b, right? And, 529 plans, whatever. There's a whole slew of things that you have to go through and determine. And by the way, they should be mentioned and specified in the employee handbook. So once you set them up, they get codified. And the employee handbook is just like the strategic plan. You got to keep it up to date. It's a dynamic document and it changes. The moment you print it, so I advise you to keep it on soft copy on the computer so you can roll them off. But the moment it's printed, it's out of date. And finally, compensation. having a well-thought-out compensation plan for employees, understanding how that plan is handled, how it's communicated to the employees, how it's non-discriminatory, fair across the organization, etc. Anybody have any hard HR stories that they'd like to share with us that cause the organization some problems? Okay. Okay, federal and state laws and regulations. Gentleman right here indicated that they use an outside firm for doing that. Somebody did in the room. And that basically allows you to stay up on what you're legally required to provide to your employees. Very important to stay on top of it. Obviously, as a small organization, I don't think any of you could afford to stay on top of that yourselves. And it's not that expensive. There's a lot of competition.
Aren't there rules as to how many employees you have to have to fall under some of that stuff?
Yeah, but you still have to be fair to employees. In other words, yes, there's certain federal requirements that require you to be 50 or over, but that doesn't give you the right to be discriminatory. Okay? So you got to...
a board that actually listens to that stuff. I already talked to you, so.
You've got to still maintain certain things. There's a difference between federal regulations, and there are certain federal regulations that everybody's responsible for, and there are certain that only larger organizations.
And so how do you get those enforced if you have no executive director and no board president and a board is falling apart? How do you get that stuff straightened out?
I would take that offline with you. There's no magic silver bullet in your problem. We spoke about that. Okay, and access to a labor lawyer. You don't have to be spending a lot of money on a labor lawyer, but identify someone that if you had an issue that came up, you can contact.
In our area,
In our area, our Chamber of Commerce says once a year they bring in a labor law lawyer. And they don't even charge for it. So Metro South Chamber, South Shore Chamber, some of the chambers do this. And usually they give you a whole book and what applies to your labor.
Right, and you got a name of somebody that if you had a problem, sounded like a reasonable human being, you could contact them. That's what I'm actually talking about. Right. Okay. Now, what resources are available to you? Nobody has extra capital. Nobody has extra money. I understand that. So doing some of this stuff as an organization is hard. But there's a number of things you can do that don't cost money. Or cost very little. First of all, there's a bunch of HR blogs. If anybody had any interest or was looking to resolve a specific problem, the internet is a wonderful resource. The only thing I warn you on is make sure that you're using a reliable source. Okay? I'll give you a source, and I mention it later on, something called SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM. They're a very reliable industry group and can be used to search out things. SHRM is key. Because they pass the validity test. They're not just, they've been out there, and they're huge national organization, and all regional chapters around the United States. HR Magazine, which is put out by SHRM, is a very useful resource. It's got a lot of hints as to what organizations can do if they have to. Department of Labor website and Federal Department of Labor, both state and federal. There's a ton of information on these websites that will allow you to research a question. And that answers it. Many times you're just trying to resolve a specific issue, and that will in many cases answer that issue. They may even have a helpline in some cases. Okay, HR Direct, which is a company, it bought a company called Genial, and that provides exactly what this gentleman here had brought up. All the signs, you know, you need certain signs within a company. One of the ones that comes to my mind right away is OSHA posters. You know, you always see them in a company, either in the coffee room or whatever, and a requirement is to post the OSHA poster on the wall to say what workers' compensation issues are involved and what safety issues should be involved, etc. So they provide all these posters and it's nominal fees. And they can tell you what you need in your particular area. We talked about SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, and I'm not a shill for them, it's just that they're a very good industry. Local Chamber of Commerce. Gentleman right here talked about the local chambers of commerce bringing in labor lawyers to tell you what your responsibilities might be and providing you a pamphlet for that. It's great service. And it costs you nothing except being a member of the chamber. Small Business Administration, the SBA can be very helpful to small companies. Again, a website which is provided there. Third-party consultants, we spoke about that, where you can outsource the HR function. Generally a pretty reasonable amount because I know they're dealing with small companies. Service vendors, the EVPs, the paychecks. Uneven, mixed bag as to whether they're doing a good job for you or not, and it depends on who the people in your area are and how they're handling that. Very customer service oriented. Sounds like you're ready to change names. LinkedIn HR groups. How many people are members of LinkedIn? Most of you. LinkedIn's another great resource that has user interest groups, as I'm sure you're aware of. And that can be very helpful in this area. Where they have chat boards and you can get on and ask a question and you'll be amazed at the answers you get. Now, you got to be careful. You got to try to understand, does this answer make sense? Does this seem reasonable? What's the resource? And finally, I understand I'm not a Twitter user, but how many Twitter users are out here? Okay, there's HR interest groups on Twitter as well, which I got to admit, I'm unfamiliar with that. I'm familiar with LinkedIn. So these are all very, for the most part, some of them are going to cost some money, but these are all pretty cost-effective ways, and some of them free, to be able to do that. So, any HR questions or strategic planning questions that Neil or I can deal with.
I recognize that each community is unique. Large cities, small towns, but I'm wondering how a board might be able to discern salary levels, categories, these kind of things. Again, each community is going to be different. Values is going to be based on what the individuals bring to that community. But are there surveys, are there things out there that are available so that you can get a ballpark figure of where the board should go?
Yeah, there are companies that do this, and we got answers. Great.
So Nancy Richard from RTD in Plymouth has been doing a salary survey for at least 7 or 8 years, and specifically for our industry, and you need television, correct? So if you participate, you're entitled to a copy.
Many of the organizations, that's a very standard kind of philosophy. If you participate, you can get a copy. There are companies that do this, and you can actually, I had 2 of them in mind, but they're escaping me right now, but you can Google them. I don't know what we did before Google. And they will come up, and you will be able to see that you'll be able to get information on that by industry, by geography, by job classification. Now, you know, it's a little screwy. It's not perfect because the job classification is cutting across various companies. They might sound similar, but in some cases they can be different. So, but you need a benchmark somewhere, and it allows you to at least use a benchmark to say what it should be. Any other comments on salary issues?
You have to be an ACM member to get that survey, to participate in it, and to get the results.
And ACM stands for?
Alliance for Community Media.
Okay. How many ACM members in the room? Pretty ubiquitous. Any other, there were some other questions? Yeah?
I just wanted to make a point. You were talking about the handbook. One thing that might be on the list that we're struggling with right now, I shouldn't say struggling with, but dealing with, is child protection policies and training. In our community, that's kind of a big focus town-wide. There's actually a mandate of community organizations, coaches, etc., participating in Darkness to Light training, which is a child protection awareness thing. And so that's, I think, community access stations. That's a bit of a struggle because it's a very open atmosphere. Various constituents coming in the door of all age ranges working together in somewhat of an unstructured production environment. And so I think that's something that should be on people's list as something to identify.
It's a great point. It's one of those cultural things that affects what's going on. It's a very important topic right now. Yeah, I think he was okay.
I just, a couple things. One is you asked in the beginning if anybody was working with an HR company, which I am. They're called Telemon Financial.
What's the name?
Telemon, T-E-L-E-M-O-N. They're based out of, ironically enough, I think Canton now. They moved, either that or Westwood, I'm not sure. And they will do as much or as little as you want, and they do handbooks as well. We have them on retainer, which is nice because I know how much to budget each year. And they will go, and they also work with Boston Neighborhood Network. They also work now with Eric Dresser, who's on the MassAccess board. He met through the Northeast region of the Alliance Conference. So I just wanted to mention that. I think I pay roughly, and it's all based on service. Like, I don't have them do reviews for staff, but I think others are having them do reviews. So just to have like a couple hours a month, they wrote our policy manual, and we get a free update at least once a year, but anytime there's a change to the laws, they automatically have it reviewed by an attorney and we get an update. So that's all rolled in. I think it's like $400 or $500 a quarter or something like that. So it's very reasonable. So to go back to the other points.
And by having a retainer, you can call up and ask them a question.
That's correct. And I do
which is a good feature.
And I do all the time. I more often than not, and I meet with them twice a year in person. More often than not, it's emails. They'll do, like, if I'm going to hire somebody with certain conditions, they'll do the hire letter for me. Means let somebody go, they'll do that as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of pluses to having that. A couple things. One is, I thought it would be important for you to talk about the new sick leave law in Massachusetts and make sure everybody is aware. The new sick leave law in Massachusetts, I think that's important. And the other thing that I think is important for this group is to discuss contract versus employee. I think a lot of people in community television pay someone to do meetings, and they perceive them as a contractor, even though they're giving them the equipment, they're telling them what time they have to be there, and they're telling them how they have to do the meeting. And I think that that can be dangerous. So those are two things that I think were important right now.
Well, I'm kind of familiar with the contractor. I'm very familiar with the contractor versus employee issue, and I'm sure a lot of you are, but it's simply if they're a contractor, you're paying them on a 1099 basis, which means you don't have to take FICA out, and they're not acting as an employee, and you don't have to get the benefits. Those are the major reasons for doing that. I don't want to give advice on that, but it's an area, and I think that's absolutely the right issue, that one has to be very careful about, because it's an interpretation of a law, and that's both federal and state, and if you you know, a lot of people take liberties at that, but they may be violating what has to be done. So I would get advice, and it may be like from a firm like this, or a labor lawyer or something, that says how you should be treating people that are coming in, and either they're working part-time as an employee or they're working as a total outside contractor. You've been having your hand in the back there, and then I'll get you.
Just to respond to that, the CPA.
Sorry, I'll give it right to you. The CPA, nonprofit and companies are CPA, they define a contractor as if they provide the same service you can, then they're not an independent contractor.
If they provide the same service you can't?
That we can.
That you can.
So then they have to be considered an employee.
It's part of your core mission.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So if it was a painter, we don't pay. That's a contract. If it's a bookkeeper, it's something to do with it. Because they provide video services, they have to be considered a part-time employee.
Yeah, just on the classification, at a media center that I was working with, they simply made everybody a employee. And the reason they did that was because the IRS was looking at nonprofits based on the money the IRS was losing based on 1099. So a lot of people were saying they were contractors, get the 1099 and not pay their taxes. So at this organization, they actually made anybody a W-2 employee. So they took all of that out of it as far as their liability. The second piece is they treated like a painter as a vendor, not a contractor.
They treated the painter as what?
A vendor
okay.
Instead of a contractor.
Same thing in essence from a tax perspective. Any other questions, comments? I think it's been great, some of the advice that you have given each other as to resources and things that you can use. So any other advice to give? And I didn't answer one of the pieces, which there was the first part of that, which was associated with the mass overtime law. I just would say it's one of those issues that you got to speak to someone who's an expert. I am not going to be able to get, first of all, I don't know much about the mass overtime law. And second of all, I would not be in a position to ever give out advice on how you should handle that. But it's one of the issues you got to make sure, I will tell you that you're in compliance with treating your employees fairly as far as paying them in coordination with that. Oh, sick time. That would be, same kind of thing, overtime, sick time. You got to be in compliance with what it is, or else you will definitely, you're setting yourself up for a potential lawsuit. And this might be one other, go on.
About benefits, PTO versus vacation time. So there's a lot of organizations that are moving more towards PTO. Can you speak to the differences between PTO versus vacation in your opinion on what they each bring?
It's PTO.
Paid time off.
Earned time off.
Yeah. Earned.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on this, but basically it's sort of saying you basically take what used to be considered sick time, vacation time, holidays, and put it into one envelope called PTO, which basically is saying you get X number of days off. You might keep holidays separate because it still is kind of separate, but sometimes you keep it the same. Because if you keep it all in one, you might be able to tell an employee, well, one employee doesn't want to take off on Armistice Day, you might want to be flexible enough to say, okay, we're not going to take off on Armistice Day for whatever reason, but you can take another day. So it's paid time off. So you might be given, for instance, company, maybe there's 10 holidays, there's 2 weeks vacation, I don't know, 20. You might tell them, and you factor in a few sick days, so you might tell them they have 22 days or whatever paid time off for a year. And you might give them the flexibility to say you don't have to take it on the day. You can take your paid time off at another time. The stipulation always is get your supervisor's approval, so that not everybody's out of the office at the same time, and it's common sense rules. So as opposed to vacation time would imply that there's a specific vacation time policy, and usually they have carryover or non-carryover restrictions within that. You can either carry over the whole amount of time or some piece of the time. And that implies usually there's a sick time policy. Most companies have moved away from sick time policies. They go into more PTO. I think the trend has been going into more PTO and getting away from the minutia that gives the employee more flexibility. Does that help?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Just curious if you can speak to exempt versus non-exempt employees?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very hard issue, like, you know, employees versus outside consultants, 1099s versus W-2s. I know this is an issue that a lot of companies are dealing with, where they were taking, they were treating employees as if they were, I always get it mixed up between exempt. Exempt means you have to get hourly wages above a certain, no, exempt means you don't. You can work unlimited amount of time. A lot of companies I know have been dinged on the issue that they were classifying employees as exempt, and when push comes to shove, they didn't meet the criteria of what exempt is, okay? I would advise, this is an area that you gotta be consistent with what regulations and law requires, to set up a policy, get outside advice, or a board member who might be an attorney or a labor attorney. Good to get a board member who might be a labor attorney on your board. I would suggest that that's a good thing, because maybe you get their time for free. So find out what the classification should be and make sure you're being fair and honest about how you're classifying your employees. You know, there's no internal wisdom. It's still an art and not a science, that area. You having some issues with that now?
I think in our organization, what we consider exempt versus non-exempt is pretty clear, but when I talk to other executive directors, I think in our industry too, there's a lot of things that happen kind of last moment, and we're pretty fragile when it comes to productions, and to ask people to stay later and deal with comp time versus overtime and all that. I just hear a lot of inconsistencies, I guess, in the field. But yeah, we try to be pretty consistent about it, but I wouldn't be very clear on what we're doing.
My guess is everybody in this room is probably to some degree or some point might be violating it in the fine print. But I don't know. One has to determine what the risk is.
So I assume you all know that the federal government, the Department of Labor, has been working on new rules for overtime. And the regs, I think, have just been issued. I'm kind of waiting to hear. But basically, it doesn't matter whether or not the classification is exempt or not. If you pay, I think the number they were going with was $50,000 or less a year, the person is entitled to overtime, regardless of their classification.
Yeah, I do remember that. That's actually been for a little while now. Some of the states have done that before.
On the federal level, they had their open comment period, and the goal was January that the regs were supposed to be ready.
Okay. Well, listen, it's we've used the time. We greatly appreciate your attention. It was a great set of discussions, and enjoy lunch. Oh yeah, right. We'll be here if there are any other questions. And one other thing, Julia will be there to. She's also a great person to talk to, and for follow-up or any issues that you might like to see ESC get involved potentially. Thank you.